Hey, folks, for episode 74 of the Rental Roundtable, we had on Nick Mavrick. He's the CEO and founder of BiltData.ai. Nick's been in the rental industry since 1998, worked at Nations Rents, worked at Volvo Rents, and recently in the last 2 years started BiltData.ai, which helps rental companies understand their data and ultimately how do they grow their business better. One of the insights he found, working at Nations Rents and Volvo Rents was that 3% of the customers driving 62% of the business. And if you can find your top 15 customers in your market and dominate and serve those customers really well, you can build an amazing niche rental business to compete with the nationals. So, a lot of lessons from his career for several decades working in the rental industry, large national rental companies, and taking that to start a data company in the rental space. So, Nick's a great guy, really humble guy, great person that's in the industry. We're all lucky to have in our space. So hope you guys enjoy. All right, everyone, welcome to the Rental Roundtable, episode number 74. We have on Nick Mavrick, CEO of Built Data. Nick, welcome to the show.
Kyle, appreciate your time today. Great to be with you and your audience. So thank you.
Yes, great to have you on. We talked yesterday. We also connected a few years ago, which is great to reconnect. We're working on a project together. So excited for this episode. We're going to kind of split into two parts. Second part, we'll talk about what you're doing on the data side. You've recently started BuiltData.ai. We'll talk about that. You've also been in the rental industry for several decades, building $2 billion startups in the rental industry, right? So a lot of people be interested in how do you help build a rental company from scratch. So I always like to start off, Nick, with your background. So love to hear about your story. How did you first get into rental? Was it in your blood? How did you get here today?
Well, happy to do that. And real quick, some of the context of my background genuinely ties to why I think Quipli is building something great, and I can explain that. But I first got into the equipment rental business. It was 1998. I was working for Intel, and I found out that a very successful business person named Wayne Huizenga. Most people know him for having owned the Miami Dolphins, but he was funding a company called Nations Rent, which was rolling up the construction equipment rental industry at the same time that United Rentals was born. United was born a little bit earlier. Tying it to Quipli, United, early in its life, had bought Wind Systems or Rental Man, and it was extremely strategic to its growth. By the way, I didn't start Nations Rent. I was 28. So I worked for the chief operating officer directly, and I was the junior person on staff, which meant I got all the overflow projects. So it taught me, it truly was my business school. It taught me everything about acquisitions or divestitures or systems integrations. Nations Rent tried to build a system like Quipli on its own and failed, had to write off not only a substantial amount of money, it was more the pain of not being able to operate the business and close the books on a timely basis. After I left Nations Rent ultimately was sold to Sunbelt by a great team. Brian Rich, great entrepreneur. Brad Coverdell, who's now head of purchasing, many others, did a great job resurrecting that company, some of which are still involved at Sunbelt. I then moved on to a division of the Volvo Group, division of Volvo construction equipment called Volvo Rents. That was a $1 billion plus startup that was franchising. And there again, I can appreciate what Quipli has pulled off because we had licensed Texada, and it's a great company today, but at the time it had holes in its system. Quipli, I know, has probably leapfrogged those other systems I referenced. I know that for a fact. But Texada at the time, we had to fill in all the pieces, or the head of great IT CIO named Dennis Carroll filled in all the holes in the systems, but had to do it outside of the system. And Volvo Rents ultimately, I feel, was pretty successful putting local owners back in business, and ultimately was sold to United Rentals. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's a quick background.
Yeah. Did you think you'd be in rental this long when you first got in? How did probably
I,
not back in 1998.
Not a chance. I did not. I love certainly the profitability of the business. It has a lot of excitement to it, but I had no idea. I mean, I was fresh out of business school working for Intel, and I didn't think I'd be involved in equipment rental. But it's been a really cool industry, and it's taken me a lot of years to learn it. There's many people can look at rental by the, I'll use myself, look at it as a younger man and thinking that it's quite simple. Um, there's an incredible amount of complexity to it. There's an incredible amount of things you can do right, that you have to do right. And if you do that, you can have a really terrifically profitable business. So,
And I think part of your, I've now known you for several years. You're a very generous person. You like to give back. I think one of the things you've done is put together a book, sort of lessons you've learned, right? Working for some of the fastest growing rental companies of the last several decades. What are some of those lessons? What are some of those insights that made Nations Rents and Volvo Rents so successful? What did you learn during those different jobs you've had?
yeah, well, thank you. When you and I first met, um, it's probably closer to 3 years ago now, I had mentioned how much I can appreciate what Quipli has pulled off and lessons I had to learn. I did write a book. It doesn't mean anything. Probably my mother was the only one who bought it, but it was, it's in essence, it's not my book. It was things I was taught by one of the greatest rental entrepreneurs. Many of your audience will probably know him, Don O'Neill. He recently passed upward in January, but Don ran a business that had 50% plus EBITDA margins, and it was a pretty big business. Nations Rent bought it. He became president, and he, among many other rental entrepreneurs, taught me, including the customer. And my job at Volvo was I headed up marketing globally and supported probably, I don't know, 500-person sales force. And what I learned among many things, one is the salesperson is the hero, the tip of the sphere, but support them properly. And if you want to achieve your financial objectives as a local owner, what you can offer is personalized service. Service is a big word. I'll come back to that. But at Nations Rent, 3% of the customers did 62% of the business. 11 did 83. And it mirrors what most people think of as the 80-20 rule, which is based on wealth distribution. And I'd say 10 years I had at Volvo, we got pretty good at deploying capital based on the 80-20 rule. So we had alignment from the CEO to the CFO to me heading up marketing to salespeople in the field, where we would push capital to them if they targeted the 15 people per store, literally. That would do 62% of their business. And why those people? We could do a tremendous amount of profiling. Um, I can go on and on and on, but principally the book is around marketing is not magic, it's math. And that you can pick your customers before they pick you, and you can beat the competition. Not that it's a zero sum gain, not that you have to beat United or Sunbelt or Herc, but you have to compete against them. And there are ways to do it and be quite successful. And you're Quipli has proven that. You've support a bunch of great businesses.
Yeah. And you just to make sure I understood, you said 3% of your customer base was driving 62% of the business. Is that something you've seen across other rental companies, or is that unique to Volvo Rent at the time?
No, that was it varies slightly, of course,
Yeah,
but
right.
generally you see that 20, you see some expression that's disproportionate. And this is not just germane to the rental business. Um, Burger King, not that anybody eats there anymore, but at the time, 25% of their customers did 50% of their business. Golf, 15% of the golfers account for 65% of the whole industry's revenue. 1% of Budweiser drinkers consume 80% of the beer, if you can believe it. Um, that it's the notion of heavy transactors. So yes, I've seen it multiple places. It varies slightly. Um, if you're a multi-billion, if you're a billion-dollar business, I would be hard pressed to say I bet 10% of the customers do 70% of the business because it's a repeat business. So if you're targeting the right people and taking care of the customer, it is recurring. So, and
Yeah,
local
and I think
owners have a
yeah, we
tremendous
mentioned
advantage. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what you sort of said there is if you understand that fact around the 80-20 rule and, in your case, 3%, 62%, capital allocation is super important. That's what the CEO of Volvo Rents was doing really well. And I think what's one of the understated um, skill sets of a great leader and great manager is capital allocation, is like being able to actually put your budget around the key things that matter. Well, let's just say you are a small rental company and you have an 80-20 rule and you've got more budget to put towards the 20%. What are some of those things that you should be doing as a rental company to continue to earn the repeat business?
Sure. Well, one is they're already allocating capital. It may not be conscious, but they've hired a salesperson. The person has a truck. I presume, the owner to scale, the owner, she or he has to hire people. So they have a salary, a truck, insurance, benefits, etc. Fully loaded, it's very easy to get to a couple hundred grand, $250,000 in just those expenses pretty quickly. You can play around with that number. You can call it a buck 50, 200, 250,000. So they already are allocating capital. And now the question is, where do they want that capital to be invested? What I would say is, of course, you have to profile your fleet, and independent rental companies are more successful today in specialty because they've moved out of general for the most part. It's not always true. To stay away from having a land war with United or Sunbelt or Herc. So they've gone into specialty. Now that they're in specialty, if they can identify the 15 people, literally, in their market, it could be 30. Of course, it depends on the size of the market. That will do 60% of the business. They've secured it. And what can they offer that person? They can offer them always what local owners like Don O'Neill did very successfully, and it's personalized value equation. So it could have been nights and weekends. It could be special terms or extended terms. It could be offering free training for their employees. It could be relationship marketing. It could be trips and hunting. And it ultimately what it forms around is a very, very high level of personal service. I'm not talking about delivering a suitcase full of cash. Um, it's saying, I'm outsourcing my equipment so I can do my job better. So I'm hiring you, Mr. or Mrs. Rental Company, and I need these things from you. Being on time, you know, always on time, right? Always take my calls, always swap it out. Don't nickel and dime me. Don't, stuff me with a damage waiver that is, fake insurance. And when you can drill into those 15 people, they are probably being underserved by the big companies. And you can rip them away. I've seen that time and time again.
Interesting. So you're saying for an independent, smaller rental company to compete with the nationals, if you believe there's 3% of your market that can drive over half your revenue, figure out that list of 10, 15, 30 people and get that. But that's half the battle is identifying that list, right? And then just go after them, right? Take them on hunting trips, golf trips, service the hell out of them, right? Because, once they're with you, you don't lose them. And I think that's the advantage for independence is you can do that as the owner. You can take them on a hunting trip. The owner of United is not going to take you on a hunting trip unless you are the biggest builder in the entire country, right? And it sounds like the nimble, smaller rental companies can win by going the extra mile that the nationals just aren't going to do.
That's correct. And you could look at the customer based on his or her lifetime value and the gross margin dollars that you're going to create as opposed to the gross margin percentage. And a lot of the bigger companies, in my opinion, don't have that kind of flexibility. So you may, nobody wants to get into a rate war. People can get stuck on rate. But if you're in a poor asset class like aerial, yeah, you might have to be, very competitive on rate, knowing you're going to make it up on the assets, call it number 11, 12, 13 on their list where your gross margin dollars will come in. Or you might say, I'm deploying a lot of my fleet, and they'll look at dollar utilization and time utilization. But if you're securing layers of your business, you can build it with those 15 people. Once you've done that, you can play around with the business a little bit more. You're building a foundation.
And I think over time, if you are servicing them super well, you're treating them and you're the best option for that that builder in your area, you probably could move up on price over a long period of time, right? You don't necessarily need to be the
Yeah,
low
and you can
cost
move it
provider.
up based on uh, growing your share of wallet, meaning we have data, um, you have data, right? We don't own the word data, but use Quipli and dive into your system and look at what a certain type of contractor rents. So non-residential construction is number one, SIC. Electrical work is number two. And generally, the top 10 items will account for 50% of a customer's entire rental spend. And those are very price sensitive. Once you move beyond the top 10 or top 25, you can have very, very high gross margins. And the customer's not going to notice, right? I don't know if you shop at Whole Foods, but some things are on sale and many things aren't. And you kind of don't notice a dollar at a time that things are higher. Um, so you can make it up. And still, you're not taking advantage of the customer. You're offering them a complete package of value that's superior. One-stop shopping has a huge cost savings in itself.
Yeah. Well, our audience knows I'm a big fan of Costco. I always talk about the $1.50 hot dog, right? And $1.50 hot dog and soda. They haven't changed the price in 40 years. They're not making money on that, but they get you in the door, right? And then you're happy to pay for other things. And also there's a perception that like, well, if the hot dog's $1.50 with the soda, then this is a great value for everything else I'm buying. There's a perceived value that you're getting a great price, right? The other thing you mentioned was, which I've seen as well as the independents sort of moving away from the general tool towards specialty, especially trading at higher valuations. Uh, it's more of a niche sort of offering. Is there any scenario like should independent rental companies continue to stay in general tool? Should they continue to try to compete with the nationals, or should they all just move towards specialty over the next few years?
I don't know how to answer that. I think every market's different, and I I think there's so many advantages they have, but independents have your clients. Um, Independents have a ton of advantages, and they just have to look at themselves as special forces and not um, getting into a land war. Right? They don't have a big enough army to go head to head. But in any given market, you know, some of the top one, two, three companies, they're operating. Um, Keep in mind that a lot of their key employees used to work for or be local owners. And I would argue many of the folks that I've talked to they don't feel as valued. That doesn't mean I think United's a great company. Sunbelt, great management, both of those top management. Herc, phenomenal management with Larry Silber. Um, but by virtue of a big company, they're not able to make it's a challenge to make the person who's the tip of the sphere feel valued. So that is the head of the store who's driving the relationship. Now think about if they go to work and they don't feel very special, um, then how do they make the customer feel? So in many respects, these big companies effectively are big banks. It's exactly what they are. Huge, gigantic balance sheets. I'm being a little simplistic because to be completely fair, Matt Flannery at United Rentals, top notch. Um, uh, what's his name? Hogan at Sunbelt, I think. Brendan Hogan, phenomenal leadership. Brad Hall, Brad Coverdale, Larry Silver, her terrific leaders. They're just wildly large companies. So market by market, of course, generally specialty is going to be the go-to place. Um, where second one is I would say look at your local ABC, Associated Builder and Contractors chapters, or local NUCA chapters, and go talk to those contractors and ask them what they need. Ask them what they're getting from the major rental companies or not getting. And pretty quickly, you can fill your dance card with the 15 people that you're looking to target. That's going to secure 62% of your base. So there's a number of ways to do it. But I would do bottom up from the customer. Depends how you consider the bottom. I would start with the customer and plan your fleet backwards as opposed to because they're going to tell you the NUCA members, the ABC members, Those are good sized businesses, but they're not mega corporations, and they're going to tell you what the gap is.
For sure, I think that's so important. Start with the customer because I think there's all these case studies, and people reach out to me because they know about the podcast. And they ask me for advice on they're going to buy a rental company, and they've got their business school case study and their financial partner, and their but they haven't talked to any customers. And I think that's where you got to start on the ground. Talk to the contractors. What are they missing? How are they being underserved? And I think that's where you start. Even starting Quipli, people told us it's a stupid idea. Maybe it was a stupid idea. You're building a rental software from scratch, right? But you started talking to the end users. How satisfied are you? 1 to 10, 3, 2, 6. Okay, you start to understand there's a market there, and I think that's the same thing for launching a business or launching a new product offering and starting with the customers, right? And understanding what they are saying because the data and everything else that you'll see from market reports doesn't tell the full story. You got to be on the ground, right?
Yeah. And there's a ton of money to be made. Um, to say it differently, the the contractors have an incredibly hard job. They operate on razor thin margins, and they need things to go right, and they need somebody they can trust and rely on, or they're literally become insolvent one project at a time. And there's a tremendous opportunity for a local owner interfacing with another local owner. It's unbelievably powerful. And in the United States, most of the wealth is companies greater than 20 employees, represent about 95% of all the wealth created in the country. So if you know that, then go to your local ABC chapter, your local NUCA chapter. AGC team tends to be a little bit bigger. Of course, it skews union because it does a fair amount of government work. Um, but it's when I was in the chair at Volvo, we did a ton of marketing with the ABC. Um, One of the ABC presidents left ABC and is now the CEO of NUCA. Great guy, Doug Carlson. So you just walk in the room and you can have very straightforward conversations about how to earn their business.
Yeah, that's great.
It's
And I think
easier than
that
it sounds.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's just getting out there, right? And I think the local builders want to work with a local rental company. All things being equal, no
No
one really
doubt,
wants to work with
100%.
megacorp.
Yeah.
Like anything, like you want to work with your local provider, right? So, I'm sort of asking these more hypothetical, controversial questions, but like the reality is, there's thousands of rental companies, and they're stronger than ever, and the independence will always be here, right? Some people think they're all going to get gobbled up. I don't personally think that. I think that's overstated, but for the reasons you said, not the average rental companies who are sort of mediocre. They over time may not have a place, but if you're going to be hungry, serve your customers well, have your niche, dominate your market, those guys are going to be here forever because the nationals can't be everywhere at all times, no matter how big they get.
No, I agree with you. I will say, um, and I'm not, I have no monopoly on. I feel like older I get that know less. I do think those big companies have Amazon like power, and they're at a tipping point. When you look at their combined fleets at top three, probably is approaching 50 billion. I'm not looking at the numbers today, and they can literally open and close factories. And there was a great entrepreneur who um, probably had closer to, $500 million fleet. And he sold um, because when he was going to place his $50 million order which is a lot, right? With a major manufacturer, they said, nah, we can't give you a production slot because one of the top three bought pretty much all the production. So they have uh, the top three have some market power in a very unique way. So if you're an independent and you can secure your supply, there's great companies out there like A&A for air compressors or battery storage. There's great companies out there like Leadwell, right? You just have you have to pair the customer up with securing your supply. And yes, you will have a very good, long, successful career in rental with Quipli
Yeah.
as your
Was,
point of rental system. So
I appreciate that because there's a lot of great other offerings out there, of course, but thank you for the plug. And I think, the reality is the nationals are become almost like the banks, like the big banks, too big to fail. They sort of can do whatever they want and like they have pricing power and they can take up a whole order, right? And I think it's a good flag is like they are vulnerable in certain pockets, but like if they really want to flex, the the country needs United Rentals, right? It's too big. It's too big for it to shut down. It's too big for them not to perform. And I think that's the thing for an independent is like they do have, between the top three, top 100, that's over half the market for rental. And because of that, there's a lot of pricing power. And that is a good point on the supply side is making sure you continue to have good equipment, right?
Yeah. And there's, what's also interesting is I know it's somewhat controversial and it's a little like everything in life, it is details, but there's, you have to be very, very flexible in purchasing. I mean, there's a lot right now. Uh, 0 hour new equipment is being auctioned. So if you are very opportunistic about understanding the cycles, you got to kind of get it right. If you can pick your 15 customers, secure your 62% of the business, go match the fleet to those folks, and then build your margin in of safety to the extent you can into that fleet acquisition, you've de-risked the majority of your business in just a few moves. And then you get to live life, right? Then you get to grow. Then you have to place orders in advance. Then you have word of mouth, your business expands. Then you've got a more complex entity, but you can de-risk at least 60% of the business pretty easily. Meaning easy. Easy in the sense that I call it the law of small numbers. If you can look at that it's 15 people that will do 62% of the business and pair the freight and secure your business there, that, it certainly sounds easier than going the other way, at least to me.
Yeah, that's great. Pick your 15 customers and build from there, right? That's a
Yeah.
great, very practical
15 at a time.
advice. I want to shift topics. Yeah, I want to shift topics to build data. I know you're a very humble guy. You don't like to talk about what you're building, but for my sake and for the sake of the audience, can you explain why you started Built Data? What is Built Data? Tell me about what you've been doing the last year and a half.
Yeah. No, thank you. And what when I what everything I've just told you, I think is quite pedestrian, right? Let me start there. And I don't I don't think you have to be. I'm smart, but not PhD level smart or uh, Silicon Valley smart. I'm smart enough, and so it's not that hard for a person like me to say, look at the 80/20 rule, right? Look at some imbalance in your customer base, and what. So when I left the industry when I was 41, I'm now 56. I wrote this book on contrarian marketing. It is a very good book because it's a field marketing guide. And I can say it's a good book because it's not my book. It was a collection of people who gave me great advice, like Don O'Neill. So I collected all these tactics and put it in the book. And it's a very good. I'm going to say some of the best people that I ever met. It's a very, very good practical field marketing and sales manual. It's very good because it's really not mine. Fast forward, I got back into the industry. I went and did different work outside of construction equipment rental. I did other rental businesses. And I, so I went to um, I did some consulting work for a large Caterpillar controlled entity, right? Or an independent dealer, but they owned a bunch of businesses not called Caterpillar. And they had what I call the law of abundance. They had every system on the planet. They had a data warehouse. They had business intelligence. They had dealer business systems. They had rental management systems. They had every subscription on the planet, whether it was Dodge, Construct, Connect, UCC information, dot, 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 dot. They received market intel from the manufacturers, and they had people, dedicated people, business analysts, IT people up the wazoo, right? Tools and people carrying it very, very expensive, but they quote unquote couldn't get their data. And it stunned me. And it stunned me. And I would produce what I consider pedestrian reports and come back to them and say, look at your customer concentrations, 10% of the customers, 70% of the business, and let's look at your share of wallet within that group. They can be your best customer, but be giving the majority of their wallet to somebody else. And the
Mm,
owner of the company was, I think, astounded. Um, and so I was thinking to myself, I don't want to live on an airplane the way I used to. So I wanted to start BiltData to productize these learnings. Um, and that's what we've done. We've productized helping people join multiple data silos, and we get very, very good at what we call predictive buyer intelligence. Doesn't mean you always focus on the best segment. You can focus on the next best, but helping people prioritize, because I think there's a lot of um, software that folks have bought that they don't get a return on, and they've entered the lane of confusion. They've bought a dog and it's not a good, like the dog runs away and bites them and like pees in the house, but they keep it around.
yeah. Yeah.
So they carry an inordinate amount of expense that's killing them. And it's causing also confusion, which even costs more money. So they're systems heavy, they're people heavy, and come back to Quipli. In many respects, how does that happen? People get stuck in legacy systems and they think it's too difficult to change.
Mm,
So Quipli and BiltData, we're in a much different business than you, can help companies leapfrog their legacy systems. And it's not a 0 or 1 decision for them. Quipli can sit on top of some of their systems. BiltData can sit on top of their system, some of their existing systems. We're pulling external market intelligence as well, and also from their systems to the extent they want us to. And we fuse it all together outside of their legacy architecture, which is crippling them. So we've started it based on that need, is help people make better decisions.
yeah, that's great. That's a very helpful explanation. I think, I've been in the automotive industry before this. A lot of people say that's 10 years ahead of rental. I think what we've seen, the big data is not new, right? That sort of came out 20 years ago. And I think it's coming around towards rental right now. And I think being able to make informed decisions with your data, right? Well, the first step is, can you access to your data? Can you understand it? Can you digest it? And that first part, I would say 80% of rental companies can't. They cannot. If you ask them, what are your best 5 performing asset classes this month, and what are your top 10 customers in the month of August, and how are they trending in September? And off the cuff, being able to say that without having to go run 3 hours of reports, right? And who are your top 5 customers most likely to churn, because we are able to look at the data of the last 12 months. We're seeing it trending down. We're seeing things that indicate there's going to be a churn or drop off, or what you even said earlier. Who are your most high potential customers? Who are the customers that they are your biggest customers, but you're only getting a fraction of the wallet share? And how do you get more of that? Which is a great insight, right? Most rental companies can't answer that at the tip of their fingers, right? And I think what you've built with BiltData is being able to help rental companies access that data. And yeah, it would be great to move to a modern rental platform with all the data easily accessible. But in lieu of doing that, you can still be on a legacy system or older system and get access to some of those insights with BiltData, right? Is that am I explaining why you decided to start this company?
Most of what we can do, and you'll get this more than us, and other people would kill me for saying this in my company, but we can accomplish. Look, I think most everything in life can be accomplished literally in 30 days. Um, so most of the work that we do can be accomplished in 2 weeks. Now, I've received advice that says fluff that up, right? Tell them it's harder. I hate dealing with those people that are inflate and give excuses and raise prices based on, we want to quickly solve a problem. This is not a legacy system. This is not moving a battleship or a cruise ship. Very quick actions can be taken a couple weeks through data extracts, whether If we're dealing with external market intelligence, we can do that within a couple weeks. If we're dealing with internal data, it can be done in parallel. But generally, I add a couple weeks to it because they have a hard time. Maybe they haven't thought about their hierarchy. They certainly haven't thought about data cleanliness, and they think it's impossible. Data cleanliness, you do it for a living. We believe most data cleanliness projects can be done pretty well in 2 weeks. So we want to help them get out of brain damage, fix their business, and get operating. So
I love the focus. The episode before this, Michael Larson came on. He co-hosts the Rental Journal podcast, and he said, "I love this phrase." He said, "A focused idiot will beat an unfocused genius every day." And I think I love you scoped your 2 weeks. We're gonna get in and out, and we're gonna do this very discreet thing. We're working with a consultant right now. We're setting up a meeting. It's a 2 week sprint, October 15th to the 30th. Meetings are set up. That's the engagement. 2 weeks, you're gonna be done. And I think if you don't do that, these things can take 6 to 12 months. That's what happens. He's like, "We got 15 different softwares, and we're gonna do a data project, and it's been a year and nothing's happened." And what you guys are saying is like, we're gonna do it in 2 weeks. We're not gonna fluff it. We're gonna be very outcome based. We're gonna do it in 2 weeks, which I love. What are some of the takeaways when you work with some of these companies and you bring data to life in ways that they've never been able to see before? What are some of the aha moments or light bulbs that go off when you work with these groups?
well, it depends on what lens you're coming in, but I'd say raise your standards. You know, if you're a business owner and you're somewhat confused or frustrated by something and you live with it, you don't even notice it anymore. The pain that you or your team's experiencing, change it. And there are companies like Quipli. We aim to be one, which keeps our promises. So raise your standards, and you can take a snapshot of if you don't know where you currently stand, then go talk to people like Quipli, or frankly, talk to us. We don't charge for this work, which is help us understand where you want to go. We can work with prospect data right off the bat, external market intelligence, and we can give them a very, very detailed profile of their market and who the best customers are, their best buyers who rent, purchase, require parts and service. And we can tell you which ones are vulnerable. And I mean, we can explain it in a common sense way. It should not be magic. It should be entirely mathematical, and use a business owner, meaning you being this fictitious person, should be able to understand every word we're saying. We see constantly 10% of the fleet owners own 70% of the fleet. We see constantly opportunities with share of wallet. People wonder about fleet expansion. When we look at a specific SIC and what they rent in descending order, it gives you the answer about the next things to add to your fleet. Sure, have a lost sales report. Absolutely. But if you're picking your customers, you know exactly how to expand your share of wallet because they're already filling that need from somebody else. So you can quickly get out of confusion. I'd say raise your standards about if you're subscribing to external data, raise your standards. If it has the wrong contact information, or it doesn't help you distinguish between rental, we have rental data, we have rental prospect data. If it doesn't tell you provide you a rental estimate and what they rent or what they buy and how much they spend on buying, raise your standards.
I love that, and it's a great push just to maintain a high bar, right? I think over time, sort of the law of entropy, everything sort of just fades to chaos, right? And I don't if you don't keep your data tight, it will go there naturally. What if I'm listening? If I'm a rental company listening to this, and I'm going, I've really thought about I've got my basic reports, and I can see X, Y, Z. They're probably not fully at the grasp of what they could get to. Like, what are some of the warning signs that would make me go, "Hey, maybe I need to call Nick and understand how built data help me"? What are some of the signals or signs that would maybe make me think maybe I am leaving something on the table because I don't really have my arms around my data?
Great question. One is I would say, how are they managed? Start with salespeople. Elliot Vigil, go talk to you, Kyle. Go talk to Elliot Vigil. Go talk to John Charbonnet. Go talk to Larry Kay. Of course, you can talk to us, but we work with all those parties. And I would look at your salespeople because that's going to drive 80% of your business. That's your relationship. Salespeople are um, your, you could look at them as the Navy or the Army. They're out there deployed. You could look at special forces. They're deployed in the field and say, do they have a defined list of people that they're targeting? Start there. I may differ philosophically from other people. Like, of course, salespeople should always be prospecting. I don't argue that. But you as an owner must provide them with a defined list of targets and start there. So if you're not providing with a defined list of targets and watching what it takes and partnering with them on the outcomes to acquire that defined list of, pick your number, 10, 20, 30 people. If you as an owner are not providing it, then you should not have that person on your payroll. Only once you have that list, or require the salesperson to come up with it and tell you why. Once you have that defined list, watch that list. And let's say hypothetically, you've now worked it up to 30 people, then raise the bar and say, okay, great job, Jane or Jimmy. Let's get it to 35 and tell me who these 5 are that you're going to choose. And I'm going to partner with you in making sure we acquire and maintain that relationship. So I would look for, you have a problem if you cannot see specificity. You cannot see actual names. You have a problem. Is it a 5-alarm fire? No, it's not. It means you're leaking and you're not building a foundation for sustainable growth. But who am I? There's some great entrepreneurs out there. So
I would agree with you. And I would tell you if I didn't agree, I think that's right. You got to be specific, right? Saying, "Oh, we're going after a builder." What? But who? Give me your list. Let me see your list, right? I love that focus. Also, I love your marketing background, and you are telling me the salespeople are the hero because usually my experience, sales and marketing, always they blame each other, right? But
no
I
doubt.
also agree. Marketing is super important. Sales is the tip of the spear, right? They're out there, and they're getting the feedback from the customers. And I think that's an important thing to remember is they're the tip of the spear. They're out there, and that's why salespeople need to have a seat at the table because they know better than anyone. They're the front lines, right? They know what's going on.
Huge. And Elliot Vigil will talk about sometimes Elliot's a wealth of knowledge, but he'll talk about how sometimes a salesperson will get into a hot territory. But keep in mind, ownership and their salespeople they hire, or often you pull the owner aside and say, I don't trust my salespeople. That's a problem. Um, but they'll trust them more when they get to specifics and provide the defined list of names. But Elliot, I remember him telling me once, you're in a hot territory and everything got built out, right? Growth moved to the next territory. And ownership gets frustrated, says, my star salesperson's no longer starring for me, right? And now distrust cycle begins. And ultimately the person quits or is fired, rinse and repeat, person's hired. And you can be much more strategic about it. Um, by the way, we're not in the consulting business. Everything I've said here, if it's valuable to you, people you work with, we're happy to give this hot air away for free and help people. That's not how we make our living. We make our living by creating very, very detailed, specific, predictive buyer intelligence, that information that the most important person, the salesperson, can truly rely on. Of course, ownership buys into it and enables that whole process. But
Well, Nick, I appreciate you coming on today and sharing what you've been building at Built Data and the wealth of knowledge since 1998. Several big, large, well-known rental companies. Last question I like to ask everyone is best career advice you've gotten or any career advice you've gotten that's helped shape your success and what you've been building.
I'm going to tie it back to you for what it's worth. I would look at very thoughtful companies that have leapfrog old behaviors and adopt the latest and greatest technology, but in a very specific way. And I know I'm not saying this because you're standing right in front of me, but I've always felt it. Quipli has leapfrogged a lot of the technology in the market. Now I know you're going to give credit to other people, and that's, I think fair. um, but if you're carrying a lot of cost, knowing that things are changing rather quickly, a repetitive theme you hear from some of the greatest luminaries in business, whether it's a Munger or a Buffett or a Dyson or a Brad Jacobs, on and on and on, is try to be on near the bleeding edge of technology where something's proven, you're leapfrogging a tech stack that no longer serves you. What is a tech stack? It is processes that you've chosen to automate, right? So you break it all down. It's not all that mysterious. Your tech is supposed to make you faster and better and arguably cheaper, more efficient. And we'll look at those costs and say, is your tech stock, which is really your field support system, right? If you rip the system out, it's all these processes that are supporting your enterprise. It's your back office, your field support service team, right? That's what we try to call it at Volvo, or field support team. The corporate office serves the field. So flip it, right? We work for the field. You work for the rental stores. I work for the salespeople. See if you can get the latest and greatest processes and tech stack that helps you move faster, better, and cheaper. And you'll do very, very, very well. So I hope that's helpful to you.
I appreciate you sharing that. The technology is a means to an end, right? Not the end itself. We, as technology people, have to
Sure.
remind our team all
Yeah,
the time, right? We're not trying to be the prettiest thing in the world. It's got to serve our business function. There's been a lot of technology shifts in my lifetime, and we're in the middle of one right now. We didn't even talk about AI, be separate
yeah,
uh,
no doubt.
setting, but a lot of exciting things. If we talk again in a year, AI would have probably had a bigger impact than we could even talk about here. So a lot of fun things going on. Nick, it's great to connect with you again after a few years, and thanks for
Vice
coming on the Rental
versa.
Roundtable today.
Yeah. I I'm excited to see what you and your team have accomplished and continue to accomplish, but most importantly, the relationships that you're building. And that's it's really cool. It's just it makes me happy to see a company like yours continuing to prosper, sort of one prove it at a time. And I know you've increased that cadence substantially, but that's what word of mouth does, right?
Yeah, well, thank you for all the kind words, Nick. It's a game of inches, takes a village, all the
I
things,
know
right?
that's one of my favorite movies.
That's
Any
right.
given
Well, thanks again,
Sunday.
Nick, for coming on today.
All right, man. God bless you.